Hey, Wee Lun. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us during the international break.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Again, appreciate you taking the time. Tottenham is back on Saturday. We are in the second week of the September international break. For those that want to get a sense of when we're recording this, because this will come out in October. And before we get into your background and before we get into the meat of the episode, I'll give folks an idea of what we want to get as an outcome for them today. And so we want to educate and inspire young athletes, specifically footballers, from the performance and proper nutrition and hydration perspective to help them maximize performance based on your work, so your research work, which we'll get into, and your practical work experience with elite footballers, especially in the Premier League. So we're not going to say like, hey, here's what the developmental or younger footballers need to do. It's more of like, here's what we see in Premier League and elite level to give those footballers something to aspire to. Because again, a lot of your experience and research is based on Premier League. And then also, I believe we can help educate and inspire some up and coming data professionals on like, what's it like working at a club in the Premier League from the data perspective. Because again, as we'll speak to, a lot of your work is very data driven. And as we know, data does not just mean numbers. There's qualitative components of that as well. So before we get into your background, which I'm very excited to talk about, what I'm curious about this, and I touched on it. So it's the second week of the international break. Premier League starts back up this weekend. Like, what happens on the 2 weeks of an international break? Does everybody just go on vacation?
Yeah, very very interesting questions. Obviously, most of our player, Tottenham first team player, will be international. So we actually don't have a lot of player in last week. So the fit player, they will be given a week off and then back in on Sunday last week. And then for the injured player, they will require to stay at the club, unfortunately, to do their rehab last week. So yeah, we don't have a lot of player, which is normally the case during international break. And then the player who are on international break will slowly back in depending on when is their last game. So we have a few player coming back on Tuesday, some coming back on Wednesday, whereas most of them were now back to the building today to get ready for the game on Saturday.
All right, great. Thank you for giving us some insight into that. And I should have mentioned in the beginning, so you are on the performance team at Tottenham Hotspur in the Premier League. You're a performance nutritionist. How many folks in the nutrition department or aspect of performance team are there at Tottenham? I believe it's you and one other person, or are
Yeah.
there more?
So we have two performing nutritionists at the first team level. So yeah, myself and the other nutritionist first team. Obviously we have about three at academy level as well, and then two at the women's team. So we are well
Oh,
covered
okay.
nutrition department.
Yes, yes, which we will get into. Though before we do, can you give people like your background story in terms of how you got to where you are, like where you came from? Because when you were telling me, I was just thinking like, wow, I want to spend some time on this to help give people a sense, like in some other episodes. It matters, though it doesn't always necessarily matter where it is that you come from, where you start. There's work along the way, attitude, etc., drive that will get you there. And I believe this will give folks a lot to think about, or at least draw inspiration from in terms of your story.
Yeah, so I'm from Malaysia, a very small town from Malaysia. It's about 2 hours away from Kuala Lumpur. Yeah, I grew up watching Premier League. I remember saying to you, I used to, because of the time zone differences, I need to stay out late to watch the football. I also pray that they'll have the early kickoff so I can watch it a little bit early rather than late. And then I always like sports, been playing lots of sport. I mean, my main sport is badminton, table tennis, but I play football as well, basketball. I watch a lot of different things, Premier League, NBA. Yeah, different types of sport. I always enjoy sport. And then because of that, I want to do something related to sport for my university. So I decided to do sports science. And at that time, sports science in Malaysia is not that popular, and there's not a lot of opportunity. When you finish your degree, you probably ended up being a personal trainer because there's not a lot of professional sport organization around in Malaysia. So I decided to first actually go to Ireland to do sports science, not for any specific reason, just because there's an agency who send Malaysia students to Ireland. So yeah, at that time, I start to learn more about sports science, the discipline. Obviously, sports science is a really broad discipline where you can progress into sport nutrition, psychology, physiology, strength and conditioning. There's lots of area that you can go into. And for me, I'm really interested in nutrition because of the biochemistry behind. I'm really fascinated by how you ingest food and how carbohydrate that get broken down into glucose and how that can help to improve performance. I think I'm really fascinated by that. So I decided I want to get into nutrition. Again, in Ireland, it's actually not as professional in terms of sport, especially where I'm in. So there's not a lot of placement or practical opportunity in Ireland. So I decided to make another move before finishing my degree. Actually, I managed to transfer to do like a sport nutrition bachelor degree undergraduate in Birmingham City Uni. So during that time, it's the first time I actually get exposed to working with athletes. So I first started working with a swimming club, which I have no idea about swimming at that time, and also so at the same time also working with a Shrewsbury Town Academy footballer. So yeah, that was great experience. Good 2 years with them. Learn a lot about how to actually work with athlete because you can have all the knowledge in the world. It's so different when you work with a real people and how you manage to translate the information to practical advice for especially for young athlete and how to talk to their parent. I think that's really important. And then yeah, after finishing my degree, then I continued my study to do a postgraduate, so master in sport nutrition at Liverpool John Moores University. So yeah, that was I would say a very difficult year because it was a COVID during
Yeah.
that. Well, we ended up basically doing our uni in our room. Really, a lot of things is online. We did manage to go to the lab and things like that. So which is quite difficult at that time, but yeah, managed to complete it. And then again, quite fortunate to get into Premier League. So I started with West Ham Academy women's team not that long after finishing my master. So I do that for a year, working with like academy footballer and also women first team player. Again, got lots of experience my first time working in that environment. And then after that, there's an opportunity now, which what I'm doing now, doing basically PhD and working with first team footballer at Tottenham Hotspur. Yeah, which is my dream opportunity because I always want to do a PhD. I enjoy research. I'm very data driven. I also enjoy working with the player as well. So I think that's um, have the both sides. So really enjoy my role so far. And then now it's come towards the end of my PhD. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully I can submit my dissertation next year. Finger crossed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. We will cross our fingers for you. And it's your second season.
No, actually, I would say probably my third season. So I joined in December 2022. So yeah, nearly 3 years now. It will be 3 years in December.
So did you get a chance to have a picture with the Europa League trophy or
Yeah, not
have you?
only Europa League trophy as well. Managed to have a chance with Heung-min Song as well with the Europa League trophy, which is I believe is getting more and more popular now. Sony in America because after joining LAFC.
Yeah, just so a sidebar on that. Others will notice this in prior episodes. If I have a jersey or a t-shirt or something tied to the guest in some way, I put it on. You and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
I will not show my bias here. When I moved to London in 2017, I chose Tottenham as the club I would support. And then I believe this shirt is from 2021, but it's a Sonny shirt. He was my favorite player, and he does seem. I'm not saying he wasn't happy in Tottenham, and maybe some of it is more like social media exposure in Los Angeles compared to, we'll say, broader London or North London or even England. He does seem very happy in Los Angeles. And I spoke with a friend of my cousin who actually got to meet him. at the LA Dodgers game after he threw out the first pitch. He chatted with him for a little bit, and he's just like, just smile, always a smile. But I'm sure when he was around Hotspur Way and the facilities, there's always a smile anyways, because that's who he is.
Yeah, obviously we work behind the scenes, so we managed to see a different side of the player. So
Yeah,
we also understand that, this player they have an image to maintain when they're outside of the club, when they're in front of the camera. So, but we always do our best to understand, how, especially in England, you get a lot of criticism if you're not performing well. Um, so I think, yeah, we appreciate that. We also sometimes you need, as a practitioner, sometimes you need to learn how to give time and space for a player, especially
definitely.
when, yeah. So that's very important.
No, yes. So thank you for that little anecdote too, and to help tease that out because it helps give some context of like how we got connected. And you mentioned that your interest and fascination in carbohydrates and how they break down to glucose and how that fuels the athlete. Where I had come across you initially was this Science in Sport webinar where you presented. Of course, you went through a lot of data, you went through the research, you gave anecdotes or quotes from Premier League players that were anonymized. And I was like, this is like what I would want to talk to Wee Lun about if I was to talk to him. Like the data part of it, right? From the qualitative research and how you can quantify some of it in terms of the timing of the carb loading, the variance that exists if it's a, say, 2-game or 2-match week versus 3-match week. But then you spoke so much to like the intangibles or interpersonal components of like, you have to be able to communicate these things with people. And then in terms of each player individually, they all come from different backgrounds. Like you have to have that sort of understanding of what would work for them because again, we're people, we're not machines. And so can you then just speak to so we'll start at this part of it. Can you speak to the importance of nutrition and hydration when it comes to elite football based on your practical experience and research experience? The reason why I want to start there foundationally is, at least here in America, you see a lot of let's just say social media trends. I think that creates confusion for the athlete, for parents. And then when I speak with staff members at the pro level, and then especially university level in America, they say things along the lines of like, we can't get the players to do the basics or the athlete to do the basics, like show up hydrated and nourished, etc. So can you share, again, from the lens of a researcher and practitioner in the Premier League, why is nutrition and especially hydration important for the athlete to perform?
Yeah, so I think we'll probably start with carbohydrate because that's the main field in football. What we say, because when you play football, is soccer is played at a really high intensity, especially in the English Premier League. So meaning that the majority of the energy is coming from carbohydrate sources. So to support the high intensity actions. So if you don't consume enough carbohydrate before the game, you will get fatigued really easily because you don't have the ability to sustain the high intensity actions. So I think that's a lot of research, a lot of evidence that actually the first study actually completed in 1970. So we have more than 50 years of knowledge about it. When you're not consuming enough carbohydrate either before or during the game, that could result in poor performance, not just physically and also cognitively as well as skill performance that we saw. Shooting, passing, dribbling ability also decline when you don't have enough carbohydrate because blood glucose level also important to support those actions as well. So I think that's one of the main thing why nutrition is really important. And then also secondly, you mentioned about hydration. Again, one of the probably the very basic thing about hydration, like, but still you probably say if you measure the player, probably I'll say 2 out of 3 player probably dehydrated before training. I think that's quite a lot of research around that. The reason why hydration is so important is because water is actually part of your blood, especially in your plasma. So if you don't drink enough water, meaning that your your blood level will go down, and then blood is really important in transporting nutrient to your muscle and also removing waste product from your muscle. So if you're not hydrated, meaning that you don't have the ability to do that, and then that will again cause you to your physical performance will drop down, and then also your skill performance as well, because our brain is also made of water as well. So if you're not
Mhm.
hydrated enough, that will also impact performance. So I think that's the performance side. But for the young player, it's really important for them also just to consume enough energy, so enough calories per day, because they are growing. And that's the part, like growth and maturation. One is stopped, then you don't get the opportunity again. Especially when we say bone development, your bone development stop when you're around 17, 18, and that's your peak bone mass. If you don't achieve enough, then you risk a serious injury either during your childhood or later towards your life as well. So I think having enough energy is also really important, especially for young athlete for growth and development. So I think that's a quite a really quick snapshot of it. I know we got a lot to cover, so we won't go any more deep.
Yes. Sure. In terms of the data aspect of it, because this is about data in sports, I think you'll find, and others find in many of the episodes, we do cover data components, though in each sport, in each role, so much is not about the data. It's how you communicate it. Is there anything at a high level or summary level that we'll just say Premier League in general is being tracked on a daily or weekly basis for the player or the footballer in terms of carb intake and or hydration? Is the are the
Yeah,
clubs generally tracking something? Does the player self-report? Can you just give some idea of like practically speaking how that works?
I think in terms of tracking that dietary intake data, what we normally do is what we call like a photography method. So you can take the photo or get the player to take a photo. And for us, we use a slightly different method than other club as well, because we use more like a menu based system. So basically, we take the order in the morning for lunch, and then we'll get the chef to weigh out the portions, so we know exactly how many gram of carbohydrate is going to that player on let's say on the day before the game or on different training days, so we can control the amount of carbohydrate. And then also, if the player is working with a private chef, then we can again communicate that information, like this is the amount of carbohydrate, and that will translate to actually how many gram of pasta or rice, and so we can control exactly how much the player is eating. And to analyze it, sometimes we'll ask the player to take a photo what they're eating at home, and then you can judge the portion and use a dietary analysis software to basically to estimate to measure how many gram of carbohydrate consists of that meal. And in terms of hydration, there's a few methods of doing it. Obviously, one very common method is to take your urine and then measure urine specific gravity, and that will tell the hydration level. Also, now we've been using a company called Inflow. What you put like a marker you put at urina, so when you pee into it, and then it will tell your hydration status straight away, either green, amber, or red. So like a traffic light system. So you get
I've
like
heard
an instant response to it. So yeah, I
I've
think that's
I oh sorry. I've heard of that. In April, met with an NHL team on the West Coast, and they were discussing this and how to try to keep it simple for the players. And they said the color system helps because if
yeah,
it's red,
yeah,
drink water, green, you're okay.
yeah,
And I'm curious related to this because we'll speak about what can the developmental players learn in terms of tips from the Premier League, though to focus on like what it's like being at a Premier League club on the staff, working with players, working with other staff members, working with the manager. I want to touch on something that you had mentioned at that science and sport webinar. And there's two parts of it. So I'll start with the first one. How much does the role of the manager at a high level play when it comes to their philosophy on data? Like, is it the case that generally speaking, most managers these days in football are data driven and or understand the need for it? And what happens if they're not? Like, is it pushing water up a mountain or up a hill? Can you just speak to that a little bit in terms of like the cultural component, how it might depend on the, we'll just say culture within the club?
yeah. I think yeah, it's a really interesting you mentioned. I'm not sure about in other sport, but in soccer, especially in the English Premier League, coaches tend to be the most dominant figure in the club. They tend to have a lot of say in a lot of things, and they tend like to control. They like to hold the power. I think you could argue that because their job is on the line as well, so that's why they want to make sure everything is under control. So you tend to get um, manager that I think when it comes to data, I think some manager were really open to it, where some manager probably not, and some manager probably have their own opinion. They might not want to see the data, especially when I'm thinking nutrition, especially body composition. So some manager they will just look at that player and then we just say, this player is not in a good shape. You need to do something with it. Know all the data, everything. You just look at by his eye, and then you just say. So I guess it's getting better how things have evolved. I think generally football club, soccer club are more data driven now, especially when it comes to recruiting. You can see like every few months we are getting more and more data analysts nowadays into the cloud. So I think it's progressing that way, which is a good way. I think also we as a nutritionist, I think we need to keep up with that as well. I think we need to be better with presenting our information. I think what often get present is body composition data, which is why that tend to be an issue because that's the only data we present. I think we need to be better in presenting other data and linking, let's say, dietary intake data with performance. I think that will help to change the narrative and also change the culture in soccer.
I'm with you there. Darcy Norman talked about this in the first episode related to your planning, prioritization, and your systems, and how the data should be used to support a narrative or an hypothesis or a point of view that oftentimes in clubs, and I see this in businesses too, based on my professional experience, is people just look at data and say, oh, the data shows this, let's do that. So you generally need to have a point of view. So I'm with you there. Just it's a good lesson in general, not just I think I believe in football from your perspective. So I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit and then jump back to stay on this thread of from like the data professional perspective. Can you give some advice or tips or recommendations to those who are maybe where you were and when you were in undergrad or in your master's before you got to the top level? So meaning, or you could even frame it this way: if you were talking to yourself from 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it would be, what advice would you give when it comes to working with data, working with others, presenting it, etc., so that they can get a sense of like, hey, if I want to have success and be at a top Premier League club, what are the things I need to be thinking about now, aside from being able to analyze data very well?
Yeah, I think for me, data skill is so important, especially for anyone. I think feel like a lot of the nutritionists or a lot of practitioner, even myself, if you say 5 years ago, I think it would be really good to learn how to present the data because data is just a number, but the way you present is so important. How to actually make sense to other key stakeholder and to other player. So you have all this data. How can you actually present in a simple way? Like is this data going to be a bar chart or is it going to be a line graph? And what are you going to show to actually make the data sensible to other or so that other can understand your data? I think that's really important. And what I probably say is probably I probably need if I can go back 5 years ago, I probably will start learning more about different data software like Tableau, Power BI, actually get really good in it so that I'm able to design my own dashboard for those. And so I think, again, that's probably the area that I will probably continue to improve. But like I said, data skill is so important. And then I think it will separate you from the rest if you're able to present data in a nice way. I think it will make you a really important asset, especially in the multidisciplinary team setting. If you can actually even understand the data from other discipline and then how you can connect your own
Yes.
data with other discipline. I think that's a very, very important skill to have. And then it will make you a much better and more rounded practitioner.
I'm with you there also, and make it analogous to the corporate world or business world where I've spent most of my career. It's very similar. Those who can put themselves in the shoes of other functions or departments to get a sense of what they're thinking and speak their language. So meet them where they are, generally can have more success because they could socialize their point of view like a little more easily, in that it gets received more clearly. And that's something that took me a long time to learn. And so I can give that similar tip or advice to others who might be in business world now thinking about moving to sport and where and what it's analogous or where the analogy could be. Before I jump back to the other thread with respect to the footballers and the athletes, can you just give a couple sentences on this part again from the advice perspective? And it could be from, again, it's your own experience, whether they're data professional, footballer, athlete, etc. Just give a couple sentences on the role of taking risks and having resiliency, because I kind of glossed over this in the beginning, but when you and I were prepping for this, like, you took a lot of risks in your career to get to where you are. So can you just give a couple sentences on that from your point of view? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, though, perhaps why it pays, taking risks pay off.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me as well, I would say throughout my career journey, I have so many setbacks, so many rejections. I think it's important to, like you say, be resilient and then also control what you can control. And also, I think taking rest. I think I'm probably not very good at that beforehand, but now I realize that it's so important to have a break before you actually burn out, because when you actually burn out, you are not productive. So having break at the right time is such a good thing, because it helps you to keep you going, make you more productive. Because sometimes I remember, like, there's days where I just like staying on the screen and doing nothing, or I try to read a paper and just the paper is reading me rather than me reading the paper.
Yes.
So yeah, you have that experience before. I think it's important that if your body needs a rest, I think you should take holidays. Especially for me, every time I don't get to go back home that often, so always good for me to, like, during the summertime I would take 2 or 3 weeks off just to go back home and see my family and friends. I think, yeah, it's really important.
Great tip for everyone. Take care of yourselves. Really, it's a long road. You could be in the moment trying to figure something out, and it might just be that, like you said, the paper's reading you. You just need a little bit of a rest to reset and come back to it. So thank you for sharing that, Wee Lun. Before we get into the last and the only names segment of Behind the Data, I want to close the loop on the other thread with respect to the footballers. If you are speaking to, say, academy level footballers, especially in America, or their parents, what tips or advice could you give to them about, from your perspective, what it takes to be elite, having worked with Premier League footballers, and also a lot of your research is based on the data from the Premier League footballers? Is there anything that, well, in America, soccer players, rest of the world football players, can learn from your experiences, like a tip, especially from the lens of hydration and nutrition, or anything else that you've seen, again, behind the scenes that you might be able to share without revealing names or details?
Yeah, to be honest, I think before we get into nutrition, I think it's really important. I think the phrase of talent might get you in the door, but attitude keeps you in the room. I think that's really important for any young athlete, because they probably manage to train with first team or be with first team because they are very talented. But what set them apart from the one that actually can play for first team and stay in first team is the one that have the best attitude. It's the one have the most diligent with, just the basic, like taking protein shake after training, taking your pills, eating the right thing, get on top with your recovery. Those are the one that tend to be able to stay in the first team, and not the most talented one, the one with the right attitude. So I think that's really important at the start. And after that, I think there are things that probably academy or youth player need to be focused on. I think one of the key thing is the development or lean body mass, so muscle mass. I think that's a research show before. there's a differences in muscle mass between first team and under 21 and under 18s player. So if you want to bridge the gap, especially in a very physical demand league in the English Premier League, I think that's the priority to if you are not fully developed in terms of lean muscle mass. And then also while training first thing, I think important to meeting the demands of the games and training as well. So you might need to change your fielding practice. It will be very different when you are at the academy level, when you progress to the first team. And then how do you manage when you have 2 or 3 games a week with the travel and things like that? So I think that those are the things that probably need to learn. And then also I think nutrition is about mastering the basic, like consuming enough carbohydrate on the day before, during the game, and then also after the game to recover. Hydration, stay hydrated every day. I think the best way to do that is to check your urine color, or if you have some sort of measurement to it, and also make sure you eat different types of fruit and vegetable to reduce muscle damage and things like that, and also consume enough protein and have it regularly throughout the day. And again, I don't think nutrition is that complicated, but the application of it is the tricky part. And then also, I often feel like football is like a skills-based sport. So that's why the attitude of the player to it can be very different, because some player they can get away with poor diet and still perform amazingly because ultimately it's the skills component involved with it. Whereas in other sport like cycling or running, if you're not consuming carbohydrate, you're not going to be performing well. So I think player can get away with it, but the one that can stay long term in the game are the one have the right attitude.
Really appreciate that. I'll summarize with master the basics in terms of foundations of hydration, nutrition, do the boring thing over and over and over and over again very well, and have a good attitude. Jacob, who was in the second episode, played tennis at University of Michigan, and he gave very similar advice in terms of like your demeanor and attitude on and off the court. It's attitude mindset goes a long way. So Wee Lun, thank you for that. Now we've had fun. We'll wrap this with having my favorite part of all this is behind the data. So I have 4 questions we'll ask. It's the same for all guests. And I'll start with this one. Is there a comfort food that you have where it is your go-to and every time you have it, you just feel good?
Yeah, I love sushi, Japanese food. So yeah, that's probably the one. If I'm going to order takeaway, that's probably the one I will order.
Love it. And are you the type to get a small amount and be happy, or you get a big set? Because my eyes will be hungrier than my stomach sometimes and get the bigger set. And then at the end, I'm like, why did I do this? But it was so good.
I think I'd probably say in the middle. I'm probably not the one who
Okay.
ended up binging. I think yeah, I will enjoy it, but I don't think I will go crazy about it.
Okay. Thanks for that. In terms of a place or a location, is there somewhere that is close to your heart for whatever reason? And if you want to share why, then feel free also.
Yeah, I think probably I would say my hometown, because especially in the last 10 years, I didn't get to spend lots of time in my hometown. I think that's probably always the special place for me, because again, it's nothing unique about the place. It's about the people over there and the memories you have over there. So yeah, I would say that's probably every time I go back, it always it's very special to me.
Amazing. That's, I believe, why the expression "there's no place like home" exists, because it's a truism. Okay, last 2. Is there a song that you play when you need to get in a specific mood? So it could be you're working on your PhD at the moment, you need to get focused, or maybe you need to get excited or pumped up. Is there a specific song that is like a go-to for you that stands out?
Yeah, I think I love Bruno Mars. So if I want to get pumped up,
Okay.
I always play Bruno Mars song. I think that's a song. That's what I like. I think that's probably my favorite. The song when I'm doing my PhD is very different. I probably will listen to some like Chinese song, which is more calm and relaxed song. So it'll be a very different song I'm listening to. So yeah, Bruno Mars is my favorite artist.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Okay. Last but not least, is there a book that you've read in the last, say, year or two that's had an impact on you or taught you a lesson and you think others should check the book out?
Yeah, I think the book I'm reading now is about it's Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah, so I'm reading. I haven't finished it, but one thing that jumped out of my mind is about when you're negotiating with someone, how you ask the question. Like when you first started with the question, try to get the response no instead of
Yes.
yes. I think that's a really interesting point. Like for instance, if you want to talk to someone, you ask, "Is it a terrible time to talk now?" So instead of "Can I talk to you?" Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we work with player all the time. Obviously, we ask questions all the time during our consultations, and you sometimes you work with very difficult players as well. So how you can actually get their response, I feel like that's a really good tips. I will continue to finish the book. I think I feel like there's still a lot of things for them, so I'll reckon that one. And then if I'm going to make another suggestion, it will be Atomic Habits by James Clear. That will be an amazing book as well. I learned a lot from there how to form and break your habits.
Awesome. Appreciate that. I'll put both of those in the notes. And I believe you'll found, like I have, with Never Split the Difference, you'll go back to it even after you finish to reference because Chris Voss does a very nice job giving you different situations and how to apply the tips and tricks. And then I'll check the one about habits because this is one that it goes back to what you said, master the basics. And that's just about developing good habits, which is also a great tip for everyone in general. Wee Lun, thank you so much again for taking the extended time on your, I guess, air quotes off day. And good luck the rest of the season. And looking forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah, thanks very much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.